Okay. Hey, y'all. I've been talking and I've been on mute. This is a thing that I do. Anyways, I was very confused over here, but again, my name is Chevon Powell. I'm the founder of GoldenBricks Events, an event production company addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors via events and special projects. I am here, just a slight change of plans. I know the description said that we'll be talking about retreats and team building, but we'll actually be talking about partnerships, building relationships for equitable futures. I am joined today with Makaela from Washington State Parks and Chandrika from Oshun Swim School. So I'm going to pass it to each of them to do introductions. So Makaela.
Thank you, Chevon. Hi, everybody. My name is Makaela Kroin, and I run the Folk and Traditional Arts program for Washington State Parks. I've been working with Chevon for about 6 years now, and one of the things that we'll be talking about is how our partnership has evolved over those 6 years. And then I'd love to pass it over to Chandrika.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Chandrika Francis. I am the founder and facilitator with Oshun Swim School. And we work to, okay, great. We work to have equity in aquatics, particularly focusing on folks of color, Black women, queer folks. How can we reimagine our relationship to water, come back to a place of reverence and safety? And that looks like swim lessons, it looks like other water workshops. And I am definitely a GoldenBricks and a Refuge Fest groupie. Chevon will tell you, I showed up with the first one with no ticket, like, please let me in. So excited to be here with y'all. Let's get into it.
Awesome. Usually I do a hand raising activity, but I'm going to do a little bit of something different. And first thing that I'll say is just remember the word unbelievable. So my background is when I was 3 years old, I started attending a camp for burn survivors. And that was my true introduction to the outdoors around people that look like me in a healing space. But fast forward a number of years and I went on my first solo backpacking trip where I was pulled over by the police and questioned on why I was in the area. He called back up on me and then continued to say pretty loudly that it was unbelievable that I was in the outdoors. So with this experience, I decided to transition GoldenBricks Events into an organization that addressed diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors and events. And in the last 6 years, we have produced over 30 events, 6-7 festivals, and a host of other things. But all of this was made possible through partnerships that we've built over the years. And our partnerships look a little bit different. So let's see if I can advance a slide. There we go. All right. So GoldenBricks Events is all about diversity in the outdoors, but we build and we design from emotional and physical safety, accessibility, connection, joy, and belonging. And we can only do this because of the partnerships that we have developed over the years with a host of partners, and our partners look different and include not only folks that support us monetarily, but attendees, community organizations, organizations like Oshun, organizations like Latino Outdoors and Asian Outdoors, and a host of others. To date, we've worked with over 50 organizations that we consider our partners, and we build from a collaborative standpoint in designing all of our events and experiences. We know that this takes a lot of work, but in order to truly serve the community, we know that we have to build deep relationships with our partners. So typically you won't hear us call anyone a sponsor or just an attendee. We're all partners in the work that we get to do. We also rely on a lot of community engagement. We do design all of our events from a community-minded standpoint. We have a community advisory board that folks from different backgrounds sit on to help us design our festival and our experiences. We believe that there is not just one way of looking at things, but a host of ways because we come from our various experiences and backgrounds. Here are a few images of past collaborations and partners from businesses like 3D Outdoors to Oshun Swim School to Washington Trails Association, Washington State Parks, a host of different agencies, local. So we work with King County Parks all the way through Washington State Parks and everything in between. Here's just a quick snapshot of some of those partners, but I wanted to quickly be able to pass it over to Makaela, who can really speak to like the framework and I think the way that we both work. And so she articulates that very well. And then after Makaela, we'll pass it over to Chandrika to share a little more about her work and the way that she approaches partnerships.
Thank you, Chevon. I manage the folk and traditional arts program at Washington State Parks, and just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that before I jump into Chevon and I's partnership. But my program was founded at State Parks 19 years ago to bring diverse arts and cultural heritage programming to our state park venues. Our programs are public, celebratory, educational, and they seek to familiarize people with the diversity of living cultural heritage across Washington. Our programs seek to expand our relationships with communities that we may not see equally reflected in our parks, and they help us understand how to better serve them. Our program, the Folk and Traditional Arts Program, myself and my colleague Quen Bishiger, we run the statewide program that is dependent on outside funding. We get federal funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and from our State Park License Plate Fund. But we approach partnerships and relationship building from a community development framework. It really puts relationship building at its core, but it also thinks about the impacts that go beyond an hour-long program or a festival or any kind of in-person program. So the community development framework is a cycle of understanding and learning, engagement, co-design, implementation, and reflection. So after identifying communities that our parks could better serve, we seek out community leaders, organizers, and partners that share our vision and goals. And then from there, we learn how to support the work that they're already engaged in. And that's important. That's an important distinction. So this kind of work is collaborative, it's iterative, and it's a planned long-term process. Each partnership is unique, and it may involve providing resources or sharing resources, providing a letter of support for a grant, or even bringing a grant opportunity to the table. So this approach, this partnership approach and the community development approach is not a quick fix, especially to addressing systemic inequity. That takes a long-term commitment. But the process does frequently shed light on barriers that we address head on, and we make progress little by little. So for the rest of my time, I wanted to share this specific example of the partnership that we've built with Chevon, GoldenBricks Events, and many of the community members and other folks that she works with. Let's see. So we originally connected for the first Refuge Outdoor Festival in 2018. And we had a couple of conversations where I wanted to see how the Folk and Traditional Arts Program could support this festival that Chevon had already built and was working towards. And So what that looked like is completely different than what our programs look like today. But that's kind of part of that iterative process, is meeting a partner where they are, learning from what they're doing, understanding how you can support what they're doing, and then filling in there, instead of asking them to come to you and build something that is serving your own need. And then after that first year of working together, we thought, okay, well, why don't we try and develop a new program? And this new program was Sunday Sermon, which took place, it was a day festival that took place at Lake Sammamish State Park in 2019. So as we developed this program, we were in a constant cycle of learning, negotiating systemic barriers, and refining the collaboration. And part of the strong relationship that we were building was discussing difficult topics, things like power imbalances, the systemic bias baked into our state procurement processes, the discrimination inherent in the insurance industry, and the challenge of access to our state park facilities. Similar challenges arise in a lot of the different partnership programs that I work on. And those challenges are things that we negotiate all year long. So while that resulting program is a beautiful event where people are celebrating heritage and having fun and being creative, all of the other 364 days of the year, we're doing the behind the scenes work to make that program happen, and to hopefully make it easier to build programs like that at a state agency or for the public, or be a better partner in the future. Jumping ahead to 2020, we found our partnership put to the test by the pandemic. All of our in-person plans for festivals and programs shifted as we negotiated a very different landscape. Fortunately, because of our relationship, we'd navigated programs or challenges in the past. I mean, we do live events, like there's no shortage of challenges. And so we're used to kind of being shapeshifters, being like, okay, well, we'll figure it out, because we need to continue to serve the communities that we have commitments to. We need to continue to provide funding for the artists that we're working with, or the musicians that we're working with. We can't just shut it down because we can't do it in person. So we had to figure out, how can we honor those commitments using the tools and the resources that we had access to. And what we ended up doing, you can kind of see in this one of these images, is, well, we went to state parks and we brought recording equipment, and we invited different artists and culture bearers, and we recorded sessions, demonstrations, workshops, panels. We produced content with community organizations and with community leaders. And we talked about some of the natural features of parks, recreation, equity and cycling, representation on public lands. We also did some informational sessions about, how do you make a camping reservation if you've never done that before? How do you know what that park's going to look like when you get there? How do you participate in a parks planning project? And what are some of the grant resources for organizations that want to take their participants out to a park, for example? You can see in this image, it's a screenshot for the equity and cycling panel that we hosted on one of our virtual programs. It was a wonderful conversation, really very powerful. And actually, all of these virtual programs are still accessible on YouTube through the State Parks website, and also through the GBE social media. As we developed storylines and visions for programs, and we related them back to parks, we also talked about the historic stories that my colleagues were working on related to Black Civilian Conservation Corps enrollees at Miller-Sylvania State Park and Rainbow Falls, and the historic Paul Robeson concerts at Peace Arch. We also talked about how to uncover stories and diversify the perspectives that we currently share, either in our interpretive signage or not at all. So we wanted to deepen our understanding of BIPOC relationships to nature and public lands. And our solution was to develop a long-range oral history project that was meant to uplift historic and contemporary stories. Public Lands Unearthed will bring light to narratives that demonstrate that the outdoors belong to all. Over the last 2 years, as we've been moving back towards in-person programs again, we have also added a new kind of program to our lineup, and that is our campouts or retreats. These are longer 2 to 3 day experiences where folks can sign up in advance and register for a 2 to 3 day program that is free. And they can bring their families, their grandkids, their grandparents, their aunties to one of these state parks that has a kind of like a lodge or an environmental learning center with multiple kinds of lodging available. So folks can try camping for the first time if they're interested, or if they're not ready for that, they have 3-sided shelters or fully enclosed lodges, so that we can meet folks where they are. And one of the many amazing resources that GoldenBricks events brings to these opportunities is the ability for folks to check out whatever gear they need, whether it's a tent or flashlights or hiking shoes, really to address a lot of the barriers that can keep people from participating equally in these experiences that we're passionate about, that we think provide healing and nurturing in nature. And then one of the other many offshoots of this relationship and this partnership that's been building over 6 years is the other connections that we make with folks like Chandrika and Oshun Swim School. For example, we, Chevon and I partnered on our Artist in Residence program at Deception Pass last year. That is like an artist residency at a kind of state park cabin that wasn't being used currently. And the idea was to make it more accessible to more people. And one of the challenges with the location of this facility was that you could only get to this island by using a watercraft, like a kayak or a canoe. And we, in the first year of the program, we knew that this was going to be a challenge, but we couldn't quite figure out a solution. Well, the partnership with Chevon meant that, I could say, hey, Chevon, we're working on this program, and I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't know what to do about this. Like, how would we provide training in water safety or access to a watercraft for somebody that, wants to deepen their art practice and do this, but doesn't have those resources? And Chevon, helped us reconnect with Chandrika and Oshun Swim School and other partners that we were then able to work with. And so just in this nexus of partnerships and relationships, it was an incredible way to leverage these relationships. So just one final thing before I pass it over to Chandrika, but building relationships with communities that have little reason to trust government institutions takes time, consistency, and authentic engagement. If we're going to continue to make progress towards realizing our missions and visions as state agencies, we really have to use all of the means at our disposal, from outreach programs to apprenticeships, from engaging in community development to making sure our agency staff reflects the visitors that we serve. Chandrika?
All right, I got the unmute. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. That was beautiful to see. The trajectory. And yeah, I guess I'll invite everyone to just take a few breaths and move your shoulders around if you need to get a sip of water, whatever you're feeling that your body may need right now. Also, if one of the folks could tell me just a time check how many minutes I'm working with, that would be helpful. But yeah, a little bit about myself. Oh, there's me paddleboarding. Thanks for that visual. So again, my name is Chandrika, and I founded Oshun Swim School 5 years ago. And I remember about a year before that explicitly telling a friend that I did not see myself ever being the type of person to start a company or an organization. I was like, I like to have my niche and do it. Like, I'm not really a founder or initiator. Little did I know. And I did not know that it would become my whole work and so much of a big part of my life. And it has been a complete and utter blessing. And I really think about the first few women who came into my swim classes and that were geared for Black women, beginner swimmers. And I figured I would see them for 1 to 2 times and then say goodbye. And they came back and they're like, cool, what's your business plan? When are we having our next class? We're not going anywhere. So, and it's really through the continued inpouring from participants and community that I have even been able to dream this big in terms of continuing in this way. And yeah, I definitely think of the first, I would say the first partnership I had in thinking about partnerships with a swim school called Water Babies. And when Oshun Swim School for me was just a dream, an idea, I got introduced to the at the time director of Water Babies. Her name is Vera, and she's a woman of color. And I told her my vision. I'm like, I really want to have a space for Black women and other folks of color to bridge this gap that we have with water. And she immediately was like, I see your vision. Let's meet next week. We're going to find pool space, and I also would love to train you. And it was just, there was no, and she runs a swim school, right? So many people, and I've come across this a lot of times as I try to work with pools, they see me as competition. They're immediately like, we already have a swim program. We already have a scholarship program, without really understanding what I do. And she immediately was like, you're not competition, we're partners in this work. And was so grateful that that was what I wanted to do, because she knew it was important, but didn't necessarily have the capacity. And so it was such an amazing introduction to partnership in this work, because it was just, how can I support, and like, let's build relationship and let's make this happen energy. And the more I connected with other pools, the more I realized like that's not necessarily what I'm going to get from everyone. So I'm really glad to have that sort of, in that time when you don't know if your vision is ever going to become anything, to have that type of energy. So yeah, partnerships can make or break an experience. I don't know where I would have gone if I hadn't met that partnership and that person at that time. And I think between that time and for a couple of years for me, I was starting to look into grants as another way of partnering, because it's definitely work that needs funding. Pools are expensive, insurance is expensive, certifications, like there needs to be money coming in. And I remember applying for a bunch of grants, and my work is it's about healing, and it's about joy in water. And it's also about trauma, and the trauma that Black women and other folks of color have and hold around water. And it's very delicate and needs to be protected. I remember writing these grants and being like, ooh, I am like really putting it out there around this like very painful history. I remember I applied to a few, and I didn't even get a response. Like, I didn't get a, hey, thanks for applying, but just it was just radio silence. And I just remember that feeling of like, this is like insulting. Like, I feel like I'm groveling for something that we should all be honored to be a part of. And I actually stepped away from any kind of looking for financial support for a while. I was like, this is gonna have to be a fee for service, because like it felt disrespectful to what I was doing to even put it out there for that type of response. And I definitely want to name Justice Outside as another partner of mine that does funding for folks of color doing environmental work. And they actually approached me and they said, hey, we have this grant. And I was like, I'm honestly like not even, I don't know. But I was like, all right, let me meet with them. And we had some meetings, and it was just conversation, relationship building. The application was mostly an interview. And they, I got like the highest grant amount that they had offered. And they were just like, we trust you to do what you need to do with this money. There wasn't some huge in-depth reporting process. They actually would schedule calls around like, what else do you need? Like, how else can we support? And I've since partnered with them in other ways, but it really healed something in me in terms of partnering with folks in terms of, okay, you can hear me. Okay, we part in terms of partnering with folks in a way that was like so respectful. And I was like, oh, this actually feels like a partnership. It doesn't feel like me groveling for something that this is impacts all of us. This is all of our work. And so that really changed that. Those two partnerships really kind of set a different tone for me around what was possible, and really helped me kind of orient to who do I even want to partner with this, because I've definitely come across a lot of folks who cannot separate, who don't see the distinction between charity and coming together because we all have this work to do. And thank goodness you have the vision and the experience to have a way to move us all forward. Like, thank goodness. And so, yeah, it's been, I think I've just appreciated the way that partnerships have kind of, there's been a gravitation. It's been really awesome working with GoldenBricks. And this last summer at Refuge in particular, I had a former student who I had worked with in a class in a pool, who was learning to be comfortable putting her face in the water, floating. We were down at the river at the festival, and she came up to me. She's like, "Oh my gosh, guess what? I just floated in the river for the first time." And she showed me this picture, and it was like this like beautiful, like the trees were around her. She looked so calm, and it was like this beautiful moment of like her being able to enjoy a river in that way for the first time. So yeah, I've just appreciated the weavings that have happened since then. I think I spoke to a little bit earlier, but I remember also getting in contact with the folks at Braided Seeds. And I remember they were saying, "Hey, we'd love to support your work." And I was throwing out some ideas for like programs. And they're like, "Oh, no, we don't want to do any new programs. What of your work that you're already doing can we support?" And I was like, "What? Like, you don't want to do more work? You want to just have the work I've been doing have more ease?" I was like, "Whoa, like that's wild. Like, I've never had that." So I think like as in whatever way we are the folks who have the financial part of the partnership and the access to resources, it's like there's so many ways to expand the ways that we show up in terms of like really making the work that's already being done more useful. And I think too, like I've definitely had some experiences, and it's pretty much always been a woman of color when I've partnered with someone and I've said like, "Hey, like here's my rate," or like here's what I'm proposing, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, like we pay other people more, so let's bump it up," And I think I've just with certain folks have found a sort of like, "Oh, like you're thinking of me as with care as well." Like it's not just about the participants. I'm also part of the community that you're wanting to feel cared for as well. And I think like that orientation has been really amazing to see where it's shown up. And I think we are all trying to unlearn these like weird dynamics around power and how to, yes, have accountability and clarity, but also like be human. And I think that I've just seen some beautiful examples in that way. And yeah, feeling grateful for it. And I think one last thing I'll say, like moving forward, I'm really hopeful about Oshun Swim School growing and being able to have right now. I am definitely like, I have so much support, and I'm also a one-woman show. But I'm really looking forward to being a team and having like a solid 3-4 of us that are making this work happen, and to growing into having much more of that connection to outdoor spaces, because that is where so many folks are wanting to learn how to swim to apply it. So I'm looking forward to more partnerships with that, more partnerships that can make that possible in terms of funding. And the vision that I see as having for Oshun Swim School in Washington State is to have land that has a pool and water access. It can be a really like a site to come and have a whole like therapeutic experience of being connected to water in this deep way that can really transition people into a new way of life with water. And yeah, looking forward to the partnerships that are going to be part of making that happen. And I didn't get a time answer, but I think I will wrap up there and pass it back to Chevon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chandrika. Thank you, Makaela. And just as we wrap up, just some final thoughts of what we kind of heard from each of the partners is there's got to be a lot of conversation and listening that needs to be done to build equitable, lasting partnerships. But also, I heard a lot about this is something I say, put the money where your mouth is really important in these relationships, but also don't tokenize, allow communities to have a lot of self-determination in support in those ways. But there's a lot of truth telling that has to be in partnerships, and that honesty has to be respected and built over time. That is our time. So thank you for joining us. And if you want to contact any of us, feel free to reach out to Oshun Swim School. You can reach out to GoldenBricks Events or Makaela Kroin, Kroin, at Washington State Parks. So thank you so much.